Hey everyone, you're listening to Brew and Boost, your daily shot of business news and bold English skills. I'm Emily.
And I'm Jake. We take one news story a day and help you understand it and speak about it like a natural.
And today's story is sizzling. We're talking about beef, more specifically, why beef prices in the US just hit a record high.
Yep, steaks are expensive, and it's not just inflation. Drought, trade policies, ranching costs. It's all piling up.
Speaking of trade, here's a quick quiz for you, Jake, and for you listeners at home. What percentage of US beef imports comes from Brazil? Is it A, 10%, B, 23%, or C, 35%?
I'll take a wild guess and say B 23%, but I'm not putting money on it.
We'll find out at the end of the episode. Stick around. Now let's jump into today's dialogue. It's all about rising beef prices, ranchers cashing in, and what big retailers are doing about it. Did you read that beef prices in the US hit a record high?
Yeah, steak costs over $11 a pound now. Ranchers are cashing in while they can.
That's because they're selling their cows instead of breeding more.
Exactly. They don't want to invest more. It's too risky with high interest rates.
And to make it worse, beef imports from Mexico and Brazil are basically off the table.
Right, the US is trying to keep out a dangerous fly, and Trump added a huge tariff.
All of this just adds fuel to the fire for consumers.
No wonder Walmart took matters into its own hands and opened a beef facility.
Let's take it from the top. Maya says, "Did you read that beef prices in the US hit a record high?" This line introduces the topic. The phrase hit a record high means prices have reached the highest point ever recorded. You can use this with prices, temperatures, or even sports stats.
Right, like gas prices hit a record high last summer. It's a very useful phrase to sound natural when talking about data or trends.
Then Alex says, yeah, steak costs over $11 a pound now. Ranchers are cashing in while they can. First, over $11 a pound tells us the new high price. And the key phrase here is cashing in. It means taking advantage of a situation to make money, usually quickly.
You'll often hear this in business or investing, like investors cashed in on the stock surge. It has a slightly opportunistic tone, like grab the money while you can.
Maya continues, that's because they're selling their cows instead of breeding more. This line explains why supply is shrinking. If ranchers sell cows now instead of keeping them to breed, they get short-term money, but there will be fewer cows in the future.
It's a short but strong example of short-term thinking versus long-term investment. Selling now might seem smart, but it reduces future supply, which pushes prices even higher.
Alex says, exactly. They don't want to invest more. It's too risky with high interest rates. So here's some economics. High interest rates mean borrowing money is expensive. Ranchers would need to borrow to grow their herds, but now that's too risky.
This connects directly to the U.S. economy. Since the Fed raised interest rates to fight inflation, loans for farms, homes, and businesses all got more expensive.
Maya then says, and to make it worse, beef imports from Mexico and Brazil are basically off the table. To make it worse signals that something bad is getting even worse. And off the table means something is no longer an option. That's a really common idiom.
Super useful in business or negotiations, like the deal's off the table, or that option is off the table now. In this case, the U.S. isn't importing beef from Mexico or Brazil like before.
Then Alex adds, right, the US is trying to keep out a dangerous fly, and Trump added a huge tariff. This line is packed. The dangerous fly refers to the New World screwworm, an insect that harms cattle. So the US paused cattle imports from Mexico to prevent outbreaks.
And Trump's new tariff? That's a 50% tax on Brazilian beef imports starting August 4th. Tariffs raise prices on imported goods, which again limits supply.
Maya follows with, all of this just adds fuel to the fire for consumers. This is another idiom. Add fuel to the fire means to make an already bad situation worse.
Totally. Prices are rising, and every new problem, drought, interest rates, trade limits, just makes it worse for shoppers.
And finally, Alex says, No wonder Walmart took matters into its own hands and opened a beef facility. No wonder means something makes sense now. And take matters into your own hands means to act without waiting for others to fix it.
So Walmart didn't want to depend on suppliers or price swings. They built their own beef processing plant to have more control over supply and cost. That's a bold move.
And a great example of how big companies respond when markets get shaky. Control the source, cut the middleman, reduce risk. All right, now that we've broken it all down, let's hear that dialogue one more time. Listen closely. You'll notice how much more you understand now.
And this time, try to catch those key expressions we mentioned. Cash in, play the long game, off the table, add fuel to the fire, and take matters into your own hands.
Here we go. Did you read that beef prices in the US hit a record high?
Yeah, steak costs over $11 a pound now. Ranchers are cashing in while they can.
That's because they're selling their cows instead of breeding more.
Exactly. They don't want to invest more. It's too risky with high interest rates.
And to make it worse, beef imports from Mexico and Brazil are basically off the table.
Right, the US is trying to keep out a dangerous fly, and Trump added a huge tariff.
All of this just adds fuel to the fire for consumers.
No wonder Walmart took matters into its own hands and opened a beef facility.
Expression Spotlight. All right, let's take a closer look at today's 5 key expressions. These aren't just useful for this one article, they show up everywhere in the news, at work, even in casual conversations.
Let's kick things off with cash in. This phrasal verb means to take advantage of a situation, usually by making money. It often suggests that someone is trying to benefit quickly before the opportunity disappears.
You'll hear it in headlines like celebrities cash in on a new trend, or investors cashed in before the crash. It can be neutral or slightly critical, like they're chasing profit.
A little bonus tip: cash in on usually needs a specific opportunity after it. For example, they cashed in on rising demand for electric cars. You're not just making money, you're reacting to a situation.
Next is play the long game. This idiom means thinking long-term instead of going for instant results. It comes from sports and strategy games, where you don't rush, you build slowly for success.
You might hear, she's playing the long game with her career, meaning she's taking small, smart steps now that will pay off later. It's the opposite of short-term thinking.
The tone is usually positive. It suggests patience, strategy, and vision. If you hear this in business or investing, it means the person is in it for the big picture, not quick wins.
Learners sometimes confuse this with wait it out or delay something. But playing the long game isn't passive, it's active. You're still making moves, just with long-term goals in mind.
Third on our list, off the table. This phrase means something is no longer being considered or available. It's very common in politics, negotiations, and even everyday decisions.
You'll often hear a politician say, military action is off the table, meaning that option is no longer up for discussion. Or your friend might say, pizza's off the table, I'm on a diet.
It comes from the image of a meeting table, where options are literally placed on the table for discussion. Once it's off, the conversation's over. Simple but powerful.
It's a great one to use in business settings, especially when talking about planning, offers, or deals.
Fourth, we've got the vivid idiom, add fuel to the fire. This means making a bad situation worse, intensifying it. The image is so clear. There's already a fire, and you're throwing gasoline on it.
You'll hear things like, his angry tweet just added fuel to the fire, or the price hike added fuel to the fire of customer complaints.
It's often used when someone should have helped, but instead they made things worse. And it works for emotional situations too. Arguments, scandals, even public protests.
Just remember, it's always negative. You don't add fuel in a good way.
And finally, take matters into your own hands. This idiom means to stop waiting for someone else and act on your own. It shows initiative, but also frustration sometimes.
Yeah, like if your landlord won't fix the heat and you go buy a heater yourself, you're taking matters into your own hands. It's bold and decisive.
This is super common in real life stories, like people starting a business because no one would hire them, or communities solving problems that officials ignored.
Tone-wise, it's usually positive. It shows you're proactive. But sometimes it also implies that the system failed and people had no choice.
So we covered cash in, play the long game, off the table, add fuel to the fire, and take matters into your own hands. All high value phrases that can help you understand complex stories and express yourself more like a native speaker. Speaking of stories, let's circle back to the quiz from earlier in the show. I asked Jake, and you listening at home, what percentage of U.S. beef imports comes from Brazil?
Right, and I guessed B, 23%. I wasn't totally sure, though.
Well, your instincts were spot on. The correct answer is B, 23%. According to the newsletter, about 23% of U.S. beef imports come from Brazil, and those imports are now facing a 50% tariff starting August 1st.
That's a big deal. No wonder prices are sizzling. And now we know why the stakes, literally, have never been higher.
If you enjoyed today's lesson, make sure to follow Brew and Boost so you never miss a dose of business English with real-world flavor.
And if one of today's expressions stuck with you, try using it in your journal or even a quick voice memo. The more you use it, the more it becomes yours.
That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with another story, another dialogue, and more ways to boost your English one cup at a time.
Until then, keep learning, stay curious, and maybe skip the steak this week.
See you next time on Brew and Boost. Bye.
Bye.